Um, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your practice?
Sure, Katie, thanks. My name is Emma. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a professional birth attendant, and I do full spectrum work. So I attend abortions, miscarriages, stillbirth, birth, postpartum, lots of stuff. And I'm also a clinical herbalist. So I help people with plants.
And what are you queering right now?
Love it. I am querying herbal natal education. So I have a project right now called Birthkeeper Herbalism that I am putting together sort of class topics on different fertility situations from conceiving to postpartum and doing it in such a way that doesn't gender plants or people, which is hard to find in herbal education. There's a lot of amazing queer herbalists doing work and a lot of amazing queer birth workers doing work. But in our area, there's not a ton of overlap. So yeah, that's what I'm querying right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And what inspired you to do the work that you do?
It's a good question. I feel like I was always kind of drawn to support work in one way or another. When I was even in high school, I worked at an organization that did domestic violence advocacy and would sometimes do on-call hospital advocacy shifts if folks went to the emergency room after an assault. So that is extremely similar to like a birth doula role or an abortion support person. You know, you meet someone in this medical setting that could potentially be uncomfortable or traumatic in like this very specific day in their life. And so that was sort of the beginning of the path. And when I met someone who worked as a birth doula, I was like, that makes sense. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, and what's your support philosophy?
Well, I tell people like that their philosophy becomes my philosophy. I really like to support people in their decision making processes. I'm a big information sharer. So when I really like the informed part of informed consent, you know, I really like to kind of non judgmentally support whatever your decisions are, as long as individuals feel like they have the info they need to make that decision, whether it's an emotional decision or like a really fact based, you know, research decision. I'm there for it all.
And so I've asked you about your natal work, but I'm also curious about your natal chart. What's your sun, moon, rising?
I'm a Libra sun, October 4, and a Sagittarius moon and Gemini rising.
All right, all right. I'm a Libra rising. This is, I think, why
Nice.
we are friends.
Coming together.
uh, what's your favorite thing about being a queer support person or about working with LGBTQ plus families?
Yes. Just like the layer of honesty, I feel like that's like baseline there. You know, just like the comfortability you have with other queer people talking about these things. Like you can say something and not be worried that you're not going to be received well. And for many folks, you know, at least in our area, there's not a ton of queer childbirth prep options or parent groups that are specifically queer and stuff like that. So sometimes being that one queer person touch point in someone's like fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum is, you know, really meaningful. There, a lot of parents are desperate for that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Especially, I think going into some of these like very medicalized settings where there's like so much expectation about what your family looks like or about like how you talk about yourself to have somebody um, who you at least know is who you know at least sees you in that way, I think is can be so valuable to families.
Totally. I love it.
Yeah. If you could improve one thing about the experience of pregnancy and birth for queer and trans families, what would it be?
Ideally, my dream is to connect more queer families with queer and trans birth workers of all types. So there's folks who support people through like their fertility process. There's people who are, you know, antenatal birth workers can help you in home if you're high risk pregnant, you know, birth and postpartum support, all of that. I just think there are lots of queer people doing all this work out there, and I don't think that parents always know where to find them. So that's it.
Yeah. And what's one piece of advice you have for new or aspiring queer and trans birth workers?
First of all, like, thank you. You're amazing. You're needed. Stick around. And also don't go it alone. You know, when I first trained as a birth doula in 2010, I was definitely the only queer person in that training. And I wasn't really sure if I could hang with the whole birth scene in general. So having, you know, located a couple other like queer or like pro-choice birth workers in the early days would have been really amazing. Took a little while to build that community, but yeah, just don't go it alone.
Yeah, I can certainly attest to what it meant for me as an aspiring birth worker to be able to have you in my community and to have somebody who I knew was willing to like share information uh, and support.
Yeah, no gatekeeping. It's birth is for everybody. Yeah.
Yes. And then finally, what's something that's like not natal or pregnancy birth related about you and your life that you want to share with folks?
That's a good question. I've been thinking about this a lot because obviously it's 2020. I'm home. But my partner and I are pretty big, like urban homesteader type people. So we literally in the quarantine have like tanned leather and like canned pickles. And I like make medicine. Obviously, as an herbalist, you know, I'm getting a lot of like mushrooms and plants from the world and making medicines for people. What else? I'm trying to think. It's so funny because you're thinking of like, get yourself a lesbian for the quarantine or whatever. Like a friend of mine had sent me this article and it was like, I'm like, yeah, my partner's like sharpening knives on rocks and like, it's very practical. So yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else about you or your work that you want to share?
No, I mean, people can find more about us like at lgbtqbirth.com. My project with herbalism and sort of natal topics is birthkeeperherbalism.com. And my actual like birth support practice website is Lavandoula. So LAVANDOULA.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.